As we have seen, GDP measures the total spending on goods and services in all markets in the economy. If total spending rises from one year to the next, at least one of the two things must be true. First, the economy is producing a larger output of goods and services. Or, second, goods and services are being sold at higher prices. When studying changes in the economy over time, economists want to separate these two effects. In particular, they want a measure of the total quantity of goods and services the economy is producing that is not affected by changes in the prices of those goods and services. To do that, economists use a measure called real GDP. Real GDP answers a question that we wonder: what would be the value of the goods and services produced this year if we valued these goods and services at the prices that prevailed in some specific year in the past? So we are trying to understand the values of output using the prices of a constant or a specific year so that we can control the changes in the price. To make it clear, for instance, to calculate the real GDP, we use 2005 prices. So what does that mean? In 2012, when you calculate the real GDP, you're still using 2005 prices, but with 2015 quantities. And if you want to look at the real GDP in 2014, the same logic applies. You are going to use 2005 prices, but using 2014 quantities, goods and services. So the idea here is that we want to control the price change so we can be able to see the change in the goods and services, because change in the goods and services will tell us how the living standards of a country is changed from one year to another. Let's look at this example to understand what is the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP. And this is a very simple example, and we have only two goods, pizza and latte. And this table shows some data for an economy, which is not through a very simplified model. Economies produces millions of goods, but here is only two goods, pizza and latte. And the table shows the prices and quantities produced of these two goods in year 2011, 2012 and 2013. To compute total spending in this economy, we would multiply the quantities of the pizza and latte by their prices. Here you can see for 2011, the price of pizza is $10 and quantity is 4,000. And price of latte is $2 and quantity 1,000. So the total expenditure in this economy for 2012, here you see, the price of the pizza per pizza times the total pizza sold, which is 4,000. Here is 4,000. Plus, we are not done yet because we have one more good. $2 per latte times 1,000 latte sold. So the value of the goods in 2011 for latte is 2,000. So the sum of these two numbers, which is 6,000, is the total expenditure in 2011. And this is nominal GDP because we are using the current year's prices. If you are looking at 2011 GDP, we are using 2011 prices to calculate the GDP. And the table shows the calculation of nominal GDP for these 3 years, not only 2011, but also 2012 and 2013. And if we do this same way in 2012, we are going to use the 2012 prices and quantities. We are going to find total expenditure on pizza, which is here 5,500, and we are going to find the total expenditure on latte, and then sum them together, and we will find the total spending in 2012. And in 2013, we will use the 2013 prices, which is $12 per pizza times 600 plus 3 times per latte times 1,200, and the total spending is 10,800. Okay, so as you see, there is an increase in total spending from nominal GDP from 6,000 to 8,250, and then in 2013 nominal GDP is increasing still to 10,800, And part of this rise is attributable to the increase in the quantities. Okay, the quantities are changing. Pizza quantities from 400 to 500, 600, and latte quantities 1000, 1100 to 1200. But also part is attributable to the increase in prices of pizza and latte. The prices are also increasing from $10, $11, $12, and $2.50, $3. To obtain a measure of the amount produced that is not affected by changes in prices, we use real GDP. Here on this table you will see how we calculate the real GDP. And real GDP is the production of goods services valued at constant prices. We calculate real GDP by first designating 1 year as a base year. Here in this example, the base year is 2011 as the base year. That means in order to calculate 2012, 2013 real GDP, we will be using 2011 prices. So let's calculate first 2011 real GDP. So the real GDP calculation requires the use of the prices in the base year. Here the base year is 2011, so we are going to use $10 for the pizza and $2 for the latte. 10 times 400 plus 2 times 1000 will give us $6,000 of real GDP. What is interesting here is that for base year, the real GDP and the nominal GDP are the same. Why? Because we use the same price levels to calculate the GDP at the base year. But in 2012, it's changing because now we are using not 2012 prices but 2011 prices. So as you see here, the price is $10, the same as 2011, but the quantity is different. Quantities belong to 2012 quantity. So now I'm considering the change in the quantity in 2012, but I'm keeping the prices constant. The same is true for latte too. So we will have a real GDP number 7,200, which is increasing from 6,000 to 7,200, but this increase is because of the change in the output, not because of the change in the prices, because we are using the constant prices. And the same is true for 2013. You'll see that we are using the constant prices, but the output level is belonging to 2013 level. And then we will get a number 8,400, which is an increase from 2012, but this increase is because of the change in the quantity. So here is you can find a table that's showing, summarizing our findings. Nominal GDP here on this column and the real GDP is here. For let's look at our findings. For the base year, nominal GDP and the real GDP are equal because they are using both the same prices. And second, you realize that nominal GDP is increasing more than real GDP. Why? Because real GDP is not affected by changes in prices. Changes in real GDP reflect only changes in the amounts being produced. But in nominal GDP, the changes in the nominal GDP reflects both the changes in prices and changes in quantity. So given that the real GDP is a measure of the economy's production of goods and services. Our goal in computing GDP is to gauge how well the overall economy is performing. Because real GDP measures the economy's production of goods and services, it reflects the economy's ability to satisfy people's needs and desires. Thus, real GDP is a better gauge of economic well-being than is nominal GDP. When economists talk about the economy's GDP, they usually mean the real GDP. And when we talk about growth in the GDP, we usually mean growth in the real GDP. Here, let's look at the changes, how we calculate the changes in the nominal GDP. In this first column, how we find this, I will show you how we find this 37.5% change. So we are trying to calculate the growth in nominal GDP. So the growth in nominal GDP can be found GDP 2012 minus GDP 2011 divided by GDP 2011 times 100. So this will give us, times 100 will give us the percentage value. And we can do the same calculation to find the change in the nominal GDP between years 2013 and 2012. The same logic applies. The last year should be written first, which is 2013, minus GDP in 2012, divided by the previous year GDP 2012 times the 100 will give us the percentage change. And you can do the same calculation for calculating the growth in the real GDP between 2011 and 2012. Now you are going to use the real GDP numbers. So in 2012, you can find real GDP in 2012 minus real GDP in 2011 divided by real GDP in 2011 times 100 will give you the percentage change. So what we know as a result is that real GDP is corrected for inflation because it's not considering the change in the prices. It's showing us how much the goods and services are produced and how much the change in the goods and services produced from one year to another.